I was haunted by the mysterious aura surrounding her phone, an object so fiercely guarded it whispered secrets in the dark. Every guarded glance and secretive smile now burned in my memory, fueling a relentless curiosity I couldn't ignore. In that electric moment, I resolved to seek the truth, even if it meant tearing apart the very foundation of our life together. For months, I had noticed a subtle change in her behavior, a guardedness that crept into the corners of our daily routines. It wasn't a single glaring anomaly, but a series of small, seemingly insignificant moments, a furtive glance at her device whenever I entered the room, an almost imperceptible tension when my hand reached out to touch it, and a guardedness in her tone when I casually mentioned a new phone model or a recent app update. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing more than habit or privacy, a harmless quirk of modern life. But as time went on, those little details began to add up, forming an uneasy mosaic of secrecy. It was one particularly restless night when doubt finally overcame me. I remember lying in bed, the silence of our shared room broken only by the distant hum of the city outside. Her phone, always by her side, lay on the nightstand. Its screen was dark, the reflection of the bedside lamp painting ghostly shapes on its surface. Something about the way it sat there, untouched, yet bristling with unspoken stories, compelled me to act. I convinced myself it was a momentary lapse of judgment, a single impulsive decision born out of overwhelming curiosity and a desperate need for answers. With trembling hands and a mind filled with conflicted emotions, I reached for the device. I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread as I powered it on. In that quiet, charged moment, I was no longer just a husband. I was a seeker on the cusp of a revelation that threatened to upend everything I believed about us. The screen lit up, and I hesitated, as if fearing that what I might discover would be too painful to bear. Scrolling through her messages and call logs, I saw fragments of conversations, snatches of words exchanged with names I didn't recognize, times and dates that didn't add up, and cryptic emojis that hinted at emotions far removed from the love I thought we shared. Every notification, every text thread, felt like a piece of a puzzle that painted a picture of secrets carefully hidden in plain sight. I remember feeling an overwhelming sorrow mixed with a burning anger, a profound sense of betrayal that struck at the very core of my being. As I delved deeper, a wave of memories crashed over me. I recalled the nights when she would retreat to our bedroom, the soft hum of her laughter replaced by long silences and fleeting moments of avoidance. I remembered the way she clutched her phone as if it were a lifeline, a treasure she wasn't willing to share. I began to see patterns in the small gaps of our conversation, the offhand comments, and the sudden disappearances into a world I wasn't privy to. With every new piece of evidence, my heart sank further, each revelation a blow that left me reeling and questioning everything we had built together. In those initial hours of solitary investigation, the weight of her secrets pressed down on me like an unyielding force. I felt isolated, betrayed by the very intimacy we had once celebrated. The realization that the person I loved was living a double life was a bitter pill, one that I struggled to swallow as I faced the reality of our fractured relationship. I tried to convince myself that there might be an explanation, a misunderstanding that could be mended with conversation and forgiveness. Yet, deep inside, a gnawing certainty grew, one that whispered that the truth was far darker than I could have imagined. The aftermath of that discovery left me suspended in a state of shock and disbelief. I sat there in the dim light of our bedroom, the phone still clutched in my hand, as tears blurred the harsh glow of the screen. Every text message, every call, was a stark reminder of the distance that had grown between us, a chasm carved out by unspoken lies and hidden truths. I felt the pieces of my heart shatter, each fragment a painful testament to a love that had been compromised by secrets. I knew that the coming days would force me to confront her, to demand answers to the questions that now burned in my soul. The man I had been, trusting, open, and vulnerable, was now replaced by someone hardened by betrayal and fueled by a desperate need to understand how we had arrived at this crossroads. As the first light of dawn crept through our window, I resolved to face the coming day with a mixture of trepidation and determination, knowing that nothing could ever be the same again. In the silent hours before sunrise, I reflected on our past, the laughter we shared, the whispered dreams, the promises made in the quiet moments of intimacy. Those memories were now tinged with a bittersweet sorrow, a reminder that the love I thought was invincible could be so easily marred by the shadows of secrecy. I wondered how I could ever trust again, how I could rebuild a foundation that had been so violently shaken by the discovery of her hidden world. Yet, amidst the crushing despair, a small ember of resolve began to glow. I realized that if I were to survive this betrayal, I would need to confront not only her deception but also the parts of myself that had allowed this doubt to fester. The journey ahead was daunting, a path lined with difficult conversations, painful revelations, and the arduous task of rebuilding what had been lost. I knew that I could no longer live in ignorance, that the pursuit of truth was both a burden and a necessity for my own healing. I spent the rest of that morning in a haze of introspection, my mind oscillating between the agony of betrayal and a desperate yearning for understanding. I questioned every moment of our life together, trying to piece together the signals I had ignored, the warnings I had brushed aside. Was I merely a passive observer in a relationship where secrets were allowed to grow unchecked? Had my own complacency contributed to the silent erosion of trust that now lay before me in stark, undeniable detail? With a heavy heart and a mind swirling with doubt and pain, I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation. The coming hours promised to be filled with uncertainty and heartache, yet I knew that the truth, however painful, was the only path forward. I made a silent vow to myself that I would no longer allow the comfort of denial to mask the reality of our crumbling bond. Instead, I would seek clarity, even if it meant exposing myself to the raw, unfiltered truth of her hidden life. In that solitary, soul-searching morning, I realized that I stood at the precipice of a defining moment, a juncture where every decision I made would shape the course of my future. The phone, once a symbol of her personal space, had transformed into a window into a world of betrayal and secrecy. Its contents were a mirror reflecting the truth I had long suspected, and as I prepared for the inevitable confrontation, I knew that my life would be irrevocably changed by what I had uncovered. As I sat there, grappling with the immense weight of my discovery, I felt a profound mix of emotions, grief for the love I thought we shared, anger at the deception that had ensnared us both, and a dawning realization that the time for silent suffering was over. With the rising sun casting long shadows across our bedroom, I steeled myself for the painful journey ahead, knowing that each step toward confronting her would be a step toward reclaiming my shattered identity. This was the beginning of a long, arduous process, a journey into the heart of betrayal, where every truth extracted from the hidden depths of a phone would force me to rebuild my understanding of our love and of myself. In the quiet aftermath of that fateful, sleepless night, I embarked on a path that promised heartbreak and healing in equal measure, a path where the only certainty was that nothing would ever be the same again. The revelation of her hidden messages left me suspended in a twilight of disbelief, a reality where every comforting memory was now marred by the acrid taste of betrayal. The air in our bedroom felt stifling as I sat alone, trembling with a tumultuous blend of anger and sorrow. Every word I had discovered on that glowing screen echoed in my mind, a relentless reminder that the woman I trusted had built an intricate world of secrets behind the guise of our shared life. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was heavy with unspoken questions and the raw, unfiltered pain of knowing that every gentle smile and every tender moment had been tainted by hidden deceit. In the early hours of that agonizing morning, as I sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, I wrestled with a cascade of emotions that left me both numb and furious. The soft clink of the spoon against the ceramic mug punctuated the quiet, each metallic sound like the chime of a death knell for the trust one had once placed so unreservedly in our union. I replayed every instance where her behavior had seemed a little too guarded, the furtive glances at her phone, the hurried whispers when I entered the room, and the inexplicable tension that would fill the space between us. All these fragments, once dismissed as trivial quirks of modern privacy, now coalesced into a devastating narrative of deception. Determined to confront this festering wound, I resolved that the time for silent torment had ended. The quiet desperation of that lonely morning had given way to a seething need for confrontation, a desperate need to understand the full extent of the betrayal. With my heart pounding a rhythm of impending reckoning, I began to prepare myself for the inevitable conversation. I rifled through my memories, trying to gather the courage to face the woman I once loved, now transformed into a stranger by the secrets she had harbored. The hours leading up to her awakening were a haze of inner turmoil. I sat in our dim living room, the once familiar shadows of our shared space now harboring a sinister quality. Every photograph on the wall, every memento from happier times, seemed to whisper reminders of a love that was rapidly disintegrating before my eyes. I found myself questioning my own worth, wondering if I had been blind to the signs or complicit in creating an environment where secrets could thrive. The thought was as bitter as it was painful, a crushing realization that perhaps, in my own vulnerability, I had allowed the fissures in our relationship to widen over time. When she finally stirred awake, the tension in the air was palpable. I watched her as she emerged from the bedroom, her movements hesitant, as if she sensed the charged atmosphere even before I spoke a single word. Her eyes met mine, and for a long moment, there was only silence, a pregnant pause that conveyed a mixture of dread, guilt, and confusion. I could see in her gaze the flicker of recognition. She knew that something was terribly wrong, yet the words to articulate her hidden life remained unspoken on her lips. With a voice that trembled between fury and despair, I asked, "Why have you been so secretive with your phone?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding, as if challenging her to unravel the web of deceit. Her face went pale, and the air around her seemed to freeze as she struggled to find an answer. The longer she hesitated, the louder the silence screamed at me, each second an eternity filled with the weight of the unsaid. The confrontation that followed was a torrent of raw emotion. She began with a series of stammered apologies, her voice quivering as she attempted to explain away the discrepancies. Every excuse she offered only deepened the chasm between us. I pressed her further, demanding to know about the names in the messages, the unaccounted-for late-night calls, and the mysterious contacts that had lit up her screen. With each response, the truth grew more fragmented, more evasive, as if she were scrambling to protect a secret too painful to reveal in full. I recall the moment vividly, the look in her eyes as she tried to hide her shame, the way her hands fidgeted nervously, and the way her voice cracked with the burden of guilt. It was as though she was living in two separate worlds, one that I had always believed was ours, and another, hidden away, where lies and half-truths reigned supreme. The more I demanded answers, the more she retreated, until finally, the dam of pent-up frustration burst open. I could no longer contain the torrent of hurt and anger, and in a moment of desperate clarity, I accused her of betraying the sacred trust that had once defined our relationship. Her eyes filled with tears, a look that shattered the last vestiges of the life we had built together. In that moment, the room seemed to shrink, the air growing thick with despair. I felt as if my entire being was being torn apart, piece by piece, by the revelation of a hidden truth. Every word she uttered, every feeble attempt at justification, struck me like a dagger. It was not merely the act of secrecy that hurt, it was the erosion of every promise, every vow we had made in the quiet intimacy of our love. As the confrontation reached its crescendo, our voices rose in a cacophony of accusations and sobs. The room was filled with the echoes of broken trust, a symphony of despair that resonated deep within my soul. I could see the pain in her eyes, a mirror of the agony I felt, yet I could not bring myself to forgive or forget. The revelation of her hidden life had shattered the illusion of our perfect union, leaving behind a trail of broken promises and unspoken regrets. The more she tried to explain, the more the fragments of our shared history seemed to splinter into irreparable shards. In the aftermath of that explosive exchange, I found myself drifting in a limbo of uncertainty. The woman who had once been my confidant now appeared as an enigma, one whose inner world was cloaked in layers of deception I could barely fathom. I felt a profound sense of isolation, as if the foundation of our love had crumbled beneath me, leaving nothing but a barren wasteland of mistrust. Every attempt to salvage the remnants of our relationship felt like a futile effort to patch up a wound too deep to heal. I retreated into a silence filled with introspection, trying to piece together the mosaic of our past in the wake of such devastating betrayal. My mind was a battleground of memories, each tender moment now tainted by the harsh light of truth. I questioned everything, the gentle touches, the shared laughter, even the whispered words of affection. Had I been complicit in creating an environment where secrets could flourish? Or was I merely a victim of an unforeseen deception that had slowly eroded the bedrock of our trust? In the midst of this inner turmoil, I sought refuge in the solitude of long, aimless walks through our neighborhood. The familiar streets, once a symbol of our shared life, now seemed alien and foreboding. Each step was a painful reminder of the distance that had grown between us, an emotional chasm that no amount of shared history could bridge. I found myself retracing old routes, revisiting places where our laughter once mingled with the soft rustle of autumn leaves, now haunted by the ghost of secrets and the bitter aftertaste of betrayal. Every night, as I returned to our now desolate home, the walls seemed to echo with the remnants of our shattered love. I would sit in the dark, surrounded by the silence that had become a constant companion, and replay the confrontation over and over in my mind. In those lonely hours, the pain would intensify, the images of her tear-streaked face and the hollow promises of reconciliation merging into a single, unyielding narrative of loss. I was left to wonder whether the life I had cherished was merely a fragile illusion, a mirage built on fleeting moments of happiness that could vanish in an instant when the truth emerged. Days turned into a blur of emotional turmoil and inner battles. I attempted to reach out to friends, seeking solace in the familiar voices of those who had known me before the betrayal, yet their reassurances only seemed to deepen the chasm of isolation. They offered words of sympathy, suggesting counseling or a temporary separation to allow emotions to settle, but nothing could mend the fractured trust or erase the images burned into my memory. I oscillated between a desperate need to hold on to the remnants of our past and a searing desire to walk away, to sever the ties that bound me to a love tainted by deceit. In one particularly anguished conversation with a close friend, I confessed the depths of my despair. I feel as though my heart has been shattered into a million pieces, I admitted, my voice raw with emotion. Everything we built together, the memories, the promises, they all seem like a lie now. My friend listened intently, offering empathy but no easy solutions. The silence that followed was filled with the unspoken understanding that some wounds were too deep to be healed by mere words. It was a moment of brutal honesty that underscored the irreversible nature of our broken bond. As the days passed, I began the arduous process of sorting through the debris of my shattered reality. I meticulously revisited every piece of evidence on her phone, each message and call log a painful reminder of the secrets I had uncovered. In doing so, I inadvertently constructed a timeline of deception, a chronology of lies that painted a picture far more complex and damning than I had ever anticipated. This painstaking reconstruction of events forced me to confront not only her betrayal but also the shortcomings within myself that may have contributed to our unraveling. The process was both cathartic and corrosive, as I grappled with feelings of guilt, self-doubt, and a growing determination to reclaim control over my life. One evening, as the golden light of dusk filtered through the blinds, I found myself at a crossroads. The internal conflict had reached a boiling point, and I was faced with an agonizing choice: to confront her further in a bid for reconciliation or to embrace the harsh truth and begin the painful process of moving on. The thought of another confrontation, fraught with the possibility of more lies and half-truths, filled me with dread. Yet, the alternative, the silent acceptance of a life built on betrayal, was equally unbearable. I realized that no matter which path I chose, the aftermath of that fateful night would continue to reverberate through every aspect of my existence. I spent that evening drafting countless letters that I never sent, a torrent of raw emotions and unanswered questions poured out onto paper in a desperate attempt to find clarity amidst the chaos. Each letter was a testament to the complexity of my feelings, a blend of anguish, regret, and a fragile glimmer of hope that perhaps, somewhere beneath the rubble of deceit, there lay a chance for redemption. But with every word written, the stark reality of our crumbling relationship loomed larger, a relentless reminder that some truths are too painful to be ignored. The night eventually deepened into an endless expanse of introspection. In the solitude of our now quiet home, I felt as though I were drowning in memories and regrets. The intimacy we once shared was replaced by an overwhelming sense of loneliness, a loneliness that was as pervasive as the silence that filled each room. I lay awake for hours, haunted by the echoes of our past, each memory a bittersweet reminder of what had been lost in the wake of her guarded secrets. As midnight approached, I resolved to confront the future with a hardened determination. I knew that the journey ahead would require not only facing the painful reality of her deception but also rediscovering the parts of myself that had been buried beneath layers of trust and hope. I promised myself that I would no longer allow the sting of betrayal to define my entire existence. Instead, I would use it as the impetus to rebuild a life anchored in honesty and resilience, even if that meant severing ties with the person I once believed was my everything. In the waning moments of that long, sorrowful night, I felt a subtle shift within me, a cautious acceptance of the fact that my life, as I had known it, was irreversibly altered. The painful collision of secrets and lies had shattered the illusions that once provided comfort, leaving behind an empty canvas upon which I could slowly begin to reconstruct my identity. Although the wounds were still raw and the future uncertain, I recognized that this was a turning point, a moment when I had no choice but to face the truth, however bitter it might be, and to forge a new path forward. As I prepared myself to meet the new day, my heart heavy with grief yet resolute in its determination to heal, I knew that the confrontation with her was only the beginning of a long and arduous journey. A journey that would test the very limits of my strength and force me to question every belief I had ever held about love, trust, and commitment. And while the road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty and lined with the remnants of a once-cherished love, I was determined to reclaim my dignity, to rebuild my life from the ruins of betrayal, and ultimately, to rediscover the truth within myself. In that fragile space between despair and resolve, I made a silent vow: I would no longer allow the secrets that had so brutally shattered my heart to dictate my future. Instead, I would embrace the pain, learn from it, and let it guide me toward a new beginning, one where the scars of yesterday would serve as the foundation for the strength of tomorrow. Every step I took from that night on was a step toward reclaiming my identity, a journey that promised to be as painful as it was necessary, as raw as it was real. In the weeks that followed our painful confrontation, I began the slow, arduous process of reclaiming not just the fragments of our shattered life, but the very essence of who I was. The echoes of that night, when the secrets of her phone had upended everything, still resonated within me, but gradually, I discovered that within the wreckage lay the raw materials for a new beginning. It was as if the painful disintegration of our shared past had cleared away a layer of dust from my soul, exposing wounds that needed healing but also an inner strength I had long forgotten existed. I started by retreating into the solitude of long walks at dusk. The soft light of the setting sun bathed the world in hues of gold and amber, and as I strolled down familiar streets that now felt strangely foreign, I found a meditative rhythm in each step. Every footfall on the cracked pavement was a quiet assertion of my determination to move forward. In these moments of solitary reflection, I allowed myself to mourn the loss of innocence and the comfortable illusion of trust that had been so brutally shattered. I listened to the rustle of leaves, the whisper of the wind, and even the distant hum of city life as if they were gentle reminders that time, inevitably, heals all wounds. At first, the days were heavy with despair, a bleak tapestry of memories that made it nearly impossible to see a future free from betrayal. I spent many hours in our once shared home, surrounded by relics of happier times that now only deepened the sense of loss. Photographs of smiles and loving embraces became painful relics, each image a bittersweet reminder of a trust that was now irrevocably broken. Yet even in that sorrow, I recognized the need to let go. I began sorting through our belongings, deciding what to keep and what to let go, a symbolic act that mirrored my inner desire to purge the remnants of deceit from my life. I sought solace in journaling, a cathartic ritual that allowed me to articulate the storm of emotions raging within me. With each word I penned, I unraveled the tangled threads of anger, grief, and confusion that had dominated my thoughts for so long. I wrote about the nights I had spent staring at the glowing screen of her phone, the quiet moments of dread before her secrets were revealed, and the gut-wrenching realization that the person I loved had hidden a part of her life from me. I also wrote about the small, unexpected moments of beauty that began to puncture the darkness, a kind smile from a stranger on a bus, the unexpected warmth of a summer rain, or the gentle reassurance of a favorite song playing on the radio. These entries, raw and unfiltered, became my sanctuary, a safe space where I could confront my pain and gradually transform it into wisdom. As the days turned into weeks, I realized that healing required more than isolation and reflection, it required genuine human connection. I reached out to old friends who had known me before the fracture, inviting them for coffee or long walks in the park. Their familiar laughter and empathetic listening offered a reminder that I was not alone, even when my heart felt like it was splintering into a million pieces. In their presence, I slowly began to rebuild a sense of self-worth that had been diminished by the betrayal. Conversations about shared memories, hopes, and even the struggles of daily life gradually filled the void left by our lost intimacy. Simultaneously, I sought professional guidance. A compassionate therapist helped me navigate the labyrinth of emotions and the self-doubt that had become all too familiar. In our sessions, I was encouraged to confront not only the pain inflicted by her hidden secrets but also my own vulnerabilities. I learned to identify patterns in my behavior, moments when my fears had silently contributed to the widening gap between us. The therapy sessions were not a panacea, rather, they were a slow and steady process of reawakening a part of me that had been buried beneath layers of unspoken hurts and regret. I learned that forgiving her was less about absolving her and more about liberating myself from the chains of relentless anger. In parallel with my personal healing, I began to reimagine what my future could look like without the shadow of betrayal. I enrolled in a creative writing workshop, a space where I could channel my tumultuous emotions into stories and poetry. The workshop was a revelation. Surrounded by people who, like me, had weathered storms of personal loss, I found that the act of creation was deeply restorative. I wrote short stories that wove themes of redemption and resilience, using my own experience as both inspiration and catharsis. Each piece I completed was a milestone on the road to self-reclamation, a testament to the idea that even the darkest chapters of our lives can give birth to powerful, transformative narratives. There were moments, however, when the pain returned unexpectedly, a song on the radio that carried a memory, a scent that evoked a long-forgotten promise, or even a casual remark that dredged up the ghost of her secretive past. On such days, I allowed myself to feel every emotion fully, without trying to mask the pain with forced cheerfulness. I found that by embracing the hurt rather than suppressing it, I could better understand its impact and gradually diminish its power over me. Each tear shed, each moment of vulnerability, became a small act of courage, a necessary step toward truly letting go. One transformative experience during this period was a solo retreat to a quiet cabin in the woods. Far removed from the relentless noise and judgment of everyday life, the isolation of nature provided me with the clarity I had been seeking. In the stillness of that secluded haven, I spent long days hiking along misty trails and sitting by a tranquil lake, where the only sounds were the whispering wind and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. In that serene environment, I found the strength to confront the raw truth of my situation. I meditated, practiced mindfulness, and allowed the natural beauty around me to serve as a metaphor for my own regeneration. The experience reminded me that life, much like the seasons, is a cycle of decay and renewal, and that there is beauty to be found in every ending. Returning home from that retreat, I felt a subtle yet profound shift within me. The constant ache of betrayal had not vanished, but it had softened into a more manageable pain, a reminder of a lesson learned rather than a scar that defined me. I began to establish new routines that centered on self-care and personal growth. I dedicated time each day to reading, writing, and even learning a new skill, cooking, a passion I had long neglected. The act of preparing meals, experimenting with flavors, and sharing dishes with friends became a daily celebration of life, a tangible reminder that joy could still be found in the everyday. In the midst of rebuilding my inner world, I also started to address the practicalities of a changed life. The questions of whether to confront her again, seek reconciliation, or completely sever our shared existence loomed large. I approached these decisions with a cautious pragmatism. I reached out to a legal advisor to understand my rights and began making arrangements for a potential separation. Yet, even as I prepared for the possibility of a definitive end, a part of me still yearned for answers and closure. I scheduled one final, measured conversation with her, a conversation that was not fueled by anger, but by the need to understand the full extent of the truths that had been hidden. In that conversation, held in a neutral space away from the memories of our home, we spoke not with the venom of betrayal but with the raw honesty of two people facing the consequences of choices made in secrecy. I listened as she attempted to explain, and though her words did little to restore the lost trust, they offered me the closure I desperately needed to move forward. That conversation marked the final turning point in our shared journey. I realized that while our past would always be a part of me, it no longer had to dictate my future. I began to embrace the idea that the pain of betrayal, as deep as it was, could coexist with a newfound sense of hope. I allowed myself to imagine a future where love and trust could be rebuilt, not necessarily with her, but within myself and with those who would earn the privilege of being part of my life. As months turned into a season of gradual healing, I noticed a remarkable transformation. The bitterness that had once consumed my every thought began to recede, replaced by a cautious optimism. I started dating again, not as a desperate attempt to fill the void left by our fractured relationship, but as a genuine exploration of what it meant to connect with another person on a level of mutual respect and honesty. Each new relationship was approached with deliberate care, with clear boundaries and an openness to vulnerability tempered by the hard-earned wisdom of my past experiences. I also rekindled old passions and developed new interests. I joined a local community group that focused on volunteer work, finding solace in the act of giving back to others. Helping those in need, listening to their stories of struggle and triumph, and realizing that pain is a universal language of the human condition, all contributed to a gradual reawakening of my spirit. In these acts of service, I discovered that even the deepest wounds could serve as a source of empathy and connection, bridging the gap between my own experiences and those of others. Over time, the pieces of my fractured heart began to knit themselves together into a mosaic that was uniquely mine, a testament not to the betrayal that had once defined me, but to the resilience and courage it took to rise above it. I learned that forgiveness is not an act of condoning the wrongdoing, but a liberating choice to reclaim one's own peace of mind. I forgave her not because she deserved it, but because I deserved a future free from the shadows of endless anger and regret. Now, as I sit by the window on a crisp autumn evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon and paint the sky in brilliant strokes of crimson and gold, I feel a quiet gratitude for every painful twist and turn of my journey. I know that the scars of betrayal will remain, etched deeply into the core of who I am, but they no longer serve as a prison. Instead, they have become the map by which I navigate a life filled with newfound clarity, purpose, and a resilient hope for the future. This is my testament, a narrative of heartbreak transformed into a catalyst for growth, of a love betrayed that eventually led me to rediscover the power of self-compassion and renewal. I now understand that the journey toward healing is neither linear nor instantaneous. It is an ever-evolving process marked by moments of triumph, setbacks, and, ultimately, the slow, steady reclamation of my true self. Each day, I embrace the beauty of imperfection, celebrating the small victories, a shared smile with a friend, a quiet moment of introspection, the simple pleasure of a well-cooked meal, as signs that I am not defined by my past, but by the strength with which I forge ahead. In the end, I have come to believe that every ending is, in fact, a new beginning in disguise. The painful chapter of discovering her hidden secrets and the subsequent unraveling of our bond will always be a part of my story, but it is not the entirety of it. I am more than the sum of my betrayals. I am a tapestry woven from threads of resilience, vulnerability, and the enduring human capacity to love again. As I look toward the horizon, I see not the shadows of yesterday, but the bright promise of tomorrow, a future where trust is rebuilt slowly, carefully, and with the deep understanding that every scar is a reminder of survival, every tear a seed for growth. And so, I step forward with a heart that, though once shattered, has been painstakingly mended. I carry with me the lessons learned from betrayal, the importance of honest communication, the necessity of setting boundaries, and above all, the profound realization that true healing begins within. I have learned to honor my emotions, to nurture my inner self, and to celebrate the journey from darkness into light. Today, I choose to live authentically, embracing both the pain of the past and the promise of a future crafted by my own resilience. This is the story of how I emerged from the ruins, not as a broken man, but as someone reborn, ready to forge connections built on honesty, to trust cautiously, and to love with a depth that comes only from having faced the deepest wounds and risen above them. Every sunrise now is a reminder that life is not defined by our failures or betrayals, but by our ability to rise, to rebuild, and to embrace the endless possibilities that lie ahead. In this quiet moment of reflection, I realize that the journey of healing continues with every breath I take. I honor my past, not as a burden, but as a crucial chapter that taught me to value the sanctity of truth and the beauty of genuine connection. And as I look forward to each new day, I do so with the steadfast belief that even the most shattered hearts can find a way to beat again, stronger and more resilient than ever before.